Your favorite player's a bust. All that and more when we return.
Welcome to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into all those red flags. Welcome to the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox. Unfortunately, not joined by Andy Starr. You guys are basically like taking turns at this point. we gotta figure out a way. We knew we were gonna miss Aaron for a while, and the funny thing is he really only missed a couple of pods, and then now we got Andy missing pods. I don't even know why. He didn't even give us an excuse this time. He just said, "You guys run the show," and that's what we're going to do. But tonight we are here to take it back a notch, to take it back a step, pump those brakes just a little bit and say, hey guys, there's some red flags on these players. And it's not to say we're not here to be Debbie Downers. We're not here to say every player's terrible, this draft class is terrible, or anything like that. No. Rather, we are here to say, what can we do to avoid the landmines in a rookie draft? What can we do? And we're going to even look at some previous drafts and look at some of the landmines that, maybe were obvious, maybe they weren't so obvious, and try to figure out, is there a way to avoid that? And then look at some players, some in the NFL, some in college still, and kind of compare them and have a little fun with it, play some games with it, all that kind of stuff. First and foremost, we got to check in with Papa Wilcox. How are you doing tonight, buddy?
Yes, John, I am doing well. Thanks for asking, and I always appreciate that. And yes, as far as tonight, I am excited to ask some questions. We'll kind of play back and forth, like rating the busts. Which of these guys do you think is most likely to become a bust or end up one? But also, you have some guys that you want to list off from previous draft classes, maybe some upcoming draft classes who have some risk of being bust as well, just to see what we can glean from past years. If you're not learning when you're doing prospect evaluation and you're in dynasty leagues, fantasy leagues in general, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice if you're just making the same mistakes every year. And there's never like 100% hit rates on guys. Like, things happen in life, but we can really identify a lot of these guys who are not going to go on to have much success at the NFL level. So yes, there's things that I look for. We'll go into depth in just a minute on some of the things that I guess I prioritize or I view as kind of a red flag.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing for me as I was compiling this list of, kind of who has busted, and, to me, the way I'm looking at it, a fourth round pick in your rookie draft isn't a bust. It's a fourth round pick. If you hit on 20% of those, you're actually doing pretty damn good. That's not a bust. It's the 104 that you drafted that busted. That's the bust. Even, maybe you can even say the second round, because obviously you still get some pretty quality players in the second round of your rookie drafts. And what I was looking at is, if it was obvious or if it seemed obvious with some of these players, and then looking at who did you draft this player over, even more importantly than just drafting that player, was there, someone else that you could have said was a little safer, didn't have as many red flags, that kind of thing. But as I was compiling this list, what I started really thinking back to previous years, is just avoid the narratives. Avoid the consensus narratives that come around every offseason. And I don't really know where or how they start or whatever, but it's like one analyst takes it and they run with it, and next thing you know, 30 analysts or just getting retweeted on Twitter or whatever it is are all saying Rome Odunze would be the 101 in any other class, or the wide receiver one in any other class. Was that ever true? Rome Odunze was never going to be the wide receiver one in any class that I looked at. But yet that was what came about, in that 2024 season. Rome Odunze is a can't miss prospect. He would be the wide receiver one in any other class. But because of MHJ and neighbors, you can't have him as your wide receiver one, that kind of thing. But then people even started saying, hey, maybe you can. They're all in the same tier, stuff like that. In previous years, we had Quentin Johnston was getting pushed up to, wide receiver one. It didn't really make any sense, with his who he was as a player and things like that. Even this past year, Jackson Dart was a one read QB who couldn't do anything and is going to completely flop. And you get these narratives that just don't really make any sense. You don't even know exactly where they came from. Tet McMillan last year was slow and can't burn anyone, can't beat a defender, can't separate. Like, where does this stuff come from? So I think even before you start looking into red flags and looking into players individually, just avoid the noise because it seems to just be so much noise. Excuse me, this time of year.
Yeah, there is a lot of noise in the echo chamber and hype train and all that stuff. It's going to happen, right? And we can exploit it, which is the nice thing as a fantasy manager. So if you see everybody praising a player and you see some, kind of maybe question marks, red flags there, don't just blindly just say, well, I guess everybody likes him. He must be great. There are some reasons why you might want to be hesitant on certain guys, and we'll get into all that here. But yeah, no, every year, I mean, there's red flags that I look for in some of the running back profiles, and those red flags are different than my receivers. Like for my receivers, I'm not as focused in on some of the speed explosiveness metrics, but the testing is very apparent. Like, how do you identify a Caleb Johnson, at least as a riskier profile? Like, there was probably nobody was expecting him to be this bad for the Steelers this last year, right? Not even getting on the field and just squandering the few opportunities that he did have in kind of an underwhelming backfield on paper. But, he wasn't that athletic of a guy. I mean, his testing speed was subpar. His production profile was fine, but not stellar by any means. And the draft capital and all that, not exceptionally robust. So I guess there are some things that I do prioritize, and that is athleticism for sure for running backs. But you also get into some of the important metrics too that are predictive for future success. So it's not only one thing that's going to make a guy a red flag, but like, for example, for wide receivers, if he blew up, but it was like his fifth year, I'm just not going to be as intrigued by that breakout in a lot of these guys. So I'm looking at like Chris Brazell this year, or there's a few other guys who just, late bloomers who really dominated at the last second. I'm usually not so into it.
Exactly. And honestly, when I was going through my list of guys with red flags from last year, I didn't even include Caleb Johnson in it because I'm not saying like Caleb Johnson, I believe, ended up being my RB6 or RB7 in the class. There was people that had him higher, there's people that had him lower, but I don't think anyone was like, he's the worst running back I've ever seen or anything like that. Like, I think, like you said, it was a surprise at how terrible his season was and everything. So I didn't even count that because that doesn't seem obvious. I can't really point to one thing and beyond maybe he's not as athletic as maybe we'd love him to be, but I can't point to one thing and say that's why that player failed or something, which the rest of these players I can at least point to one thing and say, yeah, even if he wasn't a complete bust or whatever, there was a reason why we can say this player was drafted too highly at the very least. And so,
Absolutely.
oh, go ahead. Did you have anything else, or are you just agreeing with me?
Yeah, no, I do overall agree. It's just sometimes where these guys end up in drafts. Like I saw Caleb Johnson, and he was going ahead of guys like the Colston Lovelands of the world, Tyler Warrens, Luther Burdens. You go down the list there, and it's like, well, I mean, I know it's hindsight, right? But we just get so excited about the potential of a guy having a big role in an offense at the running back position, but also got to really prioritize: is this guy a quality athlete that's going to translate and dominate at the NFL level? Of course, we should be excited about the Ashton Jantes, the Travion Hendersons of the world. Those guys are awesome athletes and producers. But yeah, so I guess that's all I want to say there.
All right, so I'm going to go back to the past 5 years of classes and just the ones that at least I picked out that seemed pretty obvious to me, at the very least, that they were drafted too early or too highly. Even if you can't say, some of them are going to be, yeah, you knew this was a complete bust, and some of them are more like he just went too early. And Aaron's probably not going to like this first one because it was in 2025. It was Travis Hunter being drafted at 103 overall in Superflex drafts. And all it was, it's not that Travis Hunter is some terrible player. It's not that he's not athletic. It's not that he doesn't have upside. It's that people were completely avoiding or skipping over the floor, the basement level floor that Travis Hunter had, which is he might not have ever played wide receiver. We really didn't know. We had the coaches telling us it was possible and they wanted him to play both ways and stuff, but we didn't have any guarantees of anything. B, Travis Hunter had never been that guy as a wide receiver. He was a great athlete. He had amazing stamina, but he was not. He was not Ted McMillan. He was not Jamar Chase or anything like that as a player. He was a raw prospect who was going to have to get better as a wide receiver. And so this isn't me saying, "Oh yeah, you're an idiot for drafting him in the first round." I'm saying 103 was just way too wild, and we can't. Looking back, there's going to be players like that in this draft class where especially when looking back at it, you're going to be able to say, I all I looked at was the ceiling, and I didn't look at the floor of that prospect whatsoever, and that's what you need to do with stuff like players like Travis Hunter, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the floor as well, because that's what makes a guy like an Emeka Buka so attractive as an asset or as a potential prospect. Just for example, another guy maybe going in a similar range in so many rookie drafts last season, it's that he was consistently like, I mean, not only was he high end recruit, yeah, but he was consistently involved at Ohio State. He's, I think, what, the all time leader in receiving yards or something like that. Like, very good career producer, steady guy, steady athlete. No real red flags, I guess, in that profile. Versus, like you said, Travis Hunter, some areas where you could poke holes, and it's my argument on the podcast for Travis Hunter when I was trying to provide like that opposite view is like, yeah, the upside is great, but like you said, the floor very low with all the factors that you went over. So no, that's a fair one. Do you have some other guys from whether it was last year or previous years that you also wanted to touch on as well?
Well, yeah, the Rose of the Senior Bowl from last year, Jack Besh, ended up being drafted around like the mid second, like 206, something like that. He was drafted over guys like Bajal Tootin, Harold Fannin, Alec Iomanner, obviously Aronde Gadsden. You can go on and on. I mean, there's obviously other players as well. Plenty of players because, it was a great draft class. But Jack Besh was never a player that anyone was all about or did anything in college to really make you excited. And I was at the Senior Bowl. I watched him. It was a fun week, and he did a lot of great things. He was the MVP of the game. Or no, maybe whatever it was. He was MVP of something. Maybe it was practice. Whatever it was, he did a lot of great things. He won he caught that game winning touchdown, and all of a sudden people just started pushing him up, pushing him up. Oh, he might be my wide receiver 5 in the class now, and things like that. And I'm not saying he can't ever do anything. Players like that, generally take a few years before they might actually do anything in the NFL. But that's kind of the point is go get you a player who, like, Bajal Tootin, we're kind of assuming he might have the reins, in Jacksonville now. Like, he might be the guy coming up this year. Harold Fannin is being considered a top 5 tight end by a lot of people in Dynasty. Alec Iomanner might not have, like, wowed anyone, but he was the wide receiver 1 for the Titans the entire season, whereas Jack Besh barely even got on the field and hardly did anything when he did. So, I think it's guys like that. It's just like, why are we drafting him in the second round? You start getting to the third and fourth rounds, you can do whatever the hell you want. Let's not draft players like that with who really didn't have anything sexy in their profile. Because, I mean, at that point, it's kind of the complete opposite. Like, instead of Travis Hunter's all ceiling, no floor, we're talking about no ceiling, all floor. It's like, floor's great, but floor, like, when you only have the floor, you're talking about round 3, round 4, round 5 players, not round 1 and 2.
Yeah, it's TCU wide receivers. I mean, that's a big takeaway here too. Unfortunately, I mean, maybe Eric McAllister will be the one right to break out of it, but even he's got some raw aspects to his profile. Yeah, so I mean, Jack Besh, that's a fair shout out, right? He not that he was being drafted that highly, but it took his fourth year to truly break out, and the guy was kind of playing like this weird receiver tight end role for a lot of his career, and I don't typically see that provide a lot of success when translating to just a pure wide receiver prospect at the NFL level. Unless, again, you're a special athlete, which Besh, not really.
Not really. Going back to 2024, I already mentioned Roma Dunze. He would be the wide receiver one in any other class. No, but he went early to mid first, like 104, 105, depending on the draft. We know how many QBs were in that draft class. So, you were potentially skipping over guys like Drake May, JJ McCarthy. I know everyone hates JJ McCarthy now, but you're still skipping over a potential superflex QB to go take a Roma Dunze. You skipped over Brock Bowers, most likely. There's a lot of other players that obviously skipped over to take a guy who really never had it and never looked like a true target earner. And was never going to be a burner, was never going to be some like major difference maker. So you're really kind of hoping that he was just going to score 20 touchdowns a season. And this isn't even me saying Roma Dunze's dead. He couldn't possibly be good or anything like that moving forward. I'm just saying, think about you drafted Roma Dunze over Drake May. How are you feeling right now? You're not feeling good. And then all right, so getting the second round of the 2024, this is where it gets a little more obvious. These are the ones where it's like I don't even understand how these players went in the second round, but I went back and looked at ADP and they did. Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette, Roman Wilson, Adonai Mitchell, Malachi Corley, all these guys got drafted over Bucky Irving, Troy Franklin, Kamani Vidal, other players like that. These are players that just have nothing in their profile. Keon Coleman was the only one that you can even say had any kind of hope ever. I did like Keon Coleman as a sophomore for Devy purposes, but then you get into what he did at FSU and it was nothing. He completely fell off as a player and he just wasn't anyone that we were excited about. And now we see obviously he's not really a quality player. He's being healthy scratched and all that kind of stuff. Same thing with Xavier Legette. Like, where did he come from? These are really easy profiles to say, okay, he got drafted in the late first, early second, whatever. It does not matter. Like that, like we're not going to fall for these players. AD Mitchell was never anything except for he scored a couple touchdowns because he was in an amazing offense. Roman Wilson was like, I don't even really know why. Like, I liked Roman Wilson, the player, but then when it actually became Roman Wilson, the rookie, I was like, what are we talking about? Of course, I'm not drafting him in the second round. So I don't know. This one just seems like the most obvious thing ever. Maybe I'm wrong here, Aaron, but is there any? Can you give anything beyond draft capital of why these players were being drafted in the second round?
Yeah, no, that was a rough stretch of players, right? So you listed off a lot of guys, and yeah, there are those cases in these careers where guys just have been overshadowed due to the situations that they're in. I mean, whether it's just the offense and the competition that they're playing against. I guess I'm mostly talking about AD Mitchell. Like as somebody who just that unrealized potential, great testing, all those things, good frame, but there were definitely red flags there. Like he did not warrant a first round selection, but a lot of those guys that you mentioned in the second, yeah, I was not taking shots on, not that interested in. I do have to push back a little bit on the Roma Dunze one from the previous or 1 year later draft because I actually think that he was a fine pick because he was going in the middle first in a lot of cases. Like you said, I don't love him over like Bowers or anybody great like that. But at the end of the day, I saw him going in that mid to kind of later first often enough. And I mean, when you look at his production, I mean, he had over 1,500 receiving yards his final year at Washington. He was pretty electric with 13 receiving touchdowns and, overall just a pretty smooth player with nice size, movement abilities, and honestly tracking for 1,100 yards and I think 12 touchdowns this season if he didn't get injured. So I don't think, Odunze is like some sort of huge bust. But when you put it into context of who he's drafted around, we can start making some better decisions. And you highlighted some guys there in the second, the Malachi Corleys of the world. And Leggett was the easiest bust candidate to pick out. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's like those late breakout guys who just win off athleticism, being older and more dominant than their competition. That's a big red flag in the profile, even if they go in the first round of the NFL draft. I get draft capital, moves, the amount of opportunity up for the player, and they're going to get a longer leash, whatever the case is. But if they're not good to begin with, I don't want anything to do with them.
Yeah, exactly. Going to 2023, Anthony Richardson over anyone. I mean, why? It's going back to the Travis Hunter thing of it's all ceiling, no floor whatsoever, and get those guys out of the first round, or at least out of the early first round, early to mid. Get them to the back end of the first round, and then maybe I won't argue with you as much. Richardson's going at like 102, 103, 104. And obviously, it was just way too high. I could list probably 30 names of who you should have taken over Anthony Richardson. The Quentin Johnston love that, people were giving, and now it seems like a joke. I mean, obviously, he had a better season in year 3 here, but but in those first couple of years, I mean, when he was being drafted, people were saying, "Oh, he could be the wide receiver one in this class." He was drafted over Jordan Addison, over Zay Flowers, over Devin Achan, and obviously, other players as well. But I mean, he'd never had any amazing seasons. He wasn't a great target earner, and he was a big play threat, but that was really all he was. And so that's kind of another thing where you're looking at the ceiling and saying, "Oh, what could he be if he lands in the right offense?" And we've seen who he can be. He can be that big play threat, but it's not going to be consistent. He's not a target earner, per se, and things like that. I think that was a pretty obvious one. I was at the very least. I don't think you were ever really on board with Johnston either, but I know for a fact that I was pushing back against anyone saying Quentin Johnston was like a top 3 wide receiver or anything like that in that class. But then we get to the second round. Will Levis over Devin Achan over Zay Flowers. Yeah, people probably want to forget about this stuff, but this stuff happened. And then Jonathan Mingo over guys like Josh Downs, Rashee Rice, Jaden Reed. All these things happened. What can we take away from 2023 to be better drafters there?
I think some of it's the same. Like the Mingo, like late producer and just impressive with frame and stature and those types of things, but it's just all eye candy. It's not necessarily real or substance behind what they've done in their collegiate career as a prospect. Remind me a couple of the other guys that you just had mentioned too.
Will Levis over Achan and Flowers.
Oh,
Quentin
yeah.
Johnston over Addison, Flowers, and Achan.
Yeah, and part of it is like the NFL is changing too. I think so many people saw Achan and they saw Zay Flowers as like these undersized guys and kind of ignored some of the athleticism and their production even too, and said NFL can't really use Achan in a significant role as more than like maybe a breather back or small role. And same with even Zay Flowers to a degree. He just didn't really get the respect. And maybe it's just because he was at Boston College, like not the most sexy spot and not the most eyes on those games, those types of things too. So I guess those are some common things that you can sometimes find is that guys getting hyped up because they went to Alabama or Texas or things like that, but then their profiles are very much lackluster. I don't always love that, right? I mean, I would way rather invest in a guy like a Zay Flowers than I don't know, Isaiah Bond or somebody like that who's never really realized their potential. I get they're different classes, but just throwing out like a recent example. So yeah, I guess the still going back to age-adjusted production matters, and truly dominating in college too. That's huge. The
Yeah,
quarterback
absolutely.
thing is tough, I guess. I will say. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
people get scared and they think they have to draft a quarterback, and sometimes like people will point to Bo Nix, like we weren't big Bo Nix fans, and they'll point to that one and say, well, hey, we got it right this time, and but he's been all over the place. He's obviously had his ups and downs and everything, and I'm not even counting the injury or anything against him, but I mean, even like his in year one, people he was QB 10, he was a top 10 QB in Dynasty, and then year two, I think he was like QB 20 or QB 18 or whatever he was. It wasn't anything special. So like, yeah, of course, if you draft a guy like that, you might get QB 18 when it's all said and done, and that's not terrible. But you're not changing your dynasty team because you got QB 18. You're not necessarily going to go out and win. You're not winning because of a guy like Bo Nix or anything like that. Whereas you can win because of a guy like a Zay Flowers, a Devin Achan, like those kind of players. So yes, I get the QBs are obviously important, but when they have so many red flags like a Will Levis, I mean, honestly, like I'd much rather you take a Bo Nix than a Will Levis. Like Bo Nix was just old, he had some injuries and stuff like that. Will Levis was just a terrible QB. I mean, you want to talk about red flags? Like the dude had red flags, and then he went on live television talking about putting mayo in coffee. Like the red flags were abundant. Let's just be very clear about that. And we can go to 2022. We can talk about Sky Moore being drafted, 106 and things like that. We can sit here and go player by player. Trey Lance being drafted 101 and 102. I think it's a lot of the same stuff. It's just don't fall for the guys with no floor. Don't fall for the guys with a lot of question marks, with a lot of red flags. Or if you do, make sure that you've taken all of the guys who don't have those flags first, and then say, okay, you know what? Now I'm going upside. Now I'm doing that. That's a completely different story. We talked about how this is not the 2026 class is not the sexiest class. It's not the best class we've ever seen. So you start getting into the early to mid second round and stuff. At that point, I almost don't even care who you take. But when you're talking about the first round, early second round, stuff like that, then I'm still saying, hey, there's guys that can actually help your teams and don't have that many red flags or anything like that. And so that's what we're gonna hopefully help you with tonight is getting into who are going to be the future red flags, who are going to be the future busts, and that's what we're going to do tonight when we dive into Devy. Alrighty, so Aaron has come up with some lists. I made up the list of all the old busts. He has the list of the new potential busts, I guess we will say. But this is a combination of NFL players, rookies, and Devy players, 2027 and 2028 players. We're not going to get into 2029s. We're not going to call any freshmen busts just yet. We've barely even looked into the freshmen. We haven't even done that pod yet. So, what we are going to sit here and we're going to compare three players at a time, and we're going to give our grade number one for the least likely to bust, two in between, and then three would be the most likely to bust from the group. And it doesn't kind of like a Travis Hunter, a Roma Dunze. It doesn't always mean they're 100% a bust. It's just saying compared to the narrative, compared to how people feel about them, things like that. And then other times we might just throw out 100 instead of three and say, yes, this player is going to bust no matter what, Jonathan Mingo style.
Yeah, no, exactly. So one would be the safe guy we rate, and then three, of course, the one like you said that is most likely to bust. I will preface this and say that the guys that I'm throwing out here, maybe we don't think any of them are going to bust. I mean, and we'll probably say that, right? We'll be upfront about it, but we still have to rate them 1 through 3 for this exercise. So, not always saying that these guys are, one of them for sure is going to, but just maybe the ones that we think will. So let's try to project a little bit here. I'm going to give John 3 names, and I want him to come up with the 1, 2, 3 on the bust list. So I'm going to give you Luther Burden, just finished his rookie season for the Bears. Elijah Surratt just capped off a national championship win for Indiana. So that was a fun game last night for anybody who watched. And then Matthew Golden, who just also finished his rookie season for the Green Bay Packers. So rate, who is the safe guy there, 2, and then up to 3, who is most likely to bust ultimately from that group?
Well, when looking at this list, I look at a guy like Golden and then I compare him to AD Mitchell, Xavier Leggett, like players like that. This is like the one of the obvious names that we can say he never did anything in college. He never stood out in college. And when he did stand out, he was at Houston. He was at a lower level program that kind of took a step forward. They transitioned from the G5 to the Big 12 in I believe his freshman season, and so or his freshman and sophomore seasons, he went from the G5 to the Big 12, and then obviously he moved over to the SEC after that. But he never really stood out. He never looked like a player that was going to actually be good, except for his athleticism. Athleticism is great, and the NFL falls in love with it, but you have to have more than athleticism. So I think this one's easy. You know me, I have a known hatred of Luther Burden, and yet I'm putting Matthew Golden at 3. That one's just obvious. Like I said, that's going back to the AD Mitchells, Malachi Corley's, Jonathan Mingo's. That's the obvious one that we should have known, and we did. I have 0 Matthew Golden on any squad. Never even considered drafting him. Aaron's saying he's marked safe as well, so we're sitting pretty there. Here's where it's going to get interesting. Everyone and their mother wants me to say Elijah Surratt at 2, Luther Burden at 1. Tell me, in what season did I watch a different college season where Luther Burden did anything except for like one game when no one played anything in the NFL playoffs when they needed him the most? Where was Luther Burden? He was a screen merchant. He was not someone who looks like he's ready to take the next step. And as much as I've hated on Burden and everything, he's obviously an explosive athlete, and the team drafted him for a reason. I think he will be on the field more next year. I think he will have more of a role next year. Hopefully he can actually beat out Olamide Zaccheaus next year and take that role. I don't think Luther Burden is going to be a bust. I do think that Luther Burden is going to be a bust compared to expectations. And so he's not going to be the wide receiver 1 on that team. If anything, it's going to be, or it is and is going to be DJ Moore until DJ Moore is not on that team anymore. Now, everyone and their mother is saying that they're going to trade DJ Moore. I don't know why they would, because he was the only one that did anything in the playoffs for them. But let's just go ahead and assume that they do. Now we have Roma Dunze still as the wide receiver 1 for that team. We have Colston Loveland as probably the receiver 2 for that team, even if you take away DJ Moore. Obviously not wide receiver, but just a receiving option. Then I would throw Luther Burden in. So I think compared to expectations, give me Burden at 2 for busting. And then Elijah Surratt is just, I mean, did you watch that game last night? He's silky smooth. He's just such a fun player, and I don't even get into the film analysis that often, but man, the dude gets open. He makes big plays. He looks athletic out there. He separates. He does everything that you want him to do, and he's projected to get great draft capital. I don't even think he has that much as far as expectations. So I definitely can't say he's going to bust compared to expectations. But I honestly, truly believe in my heart of hearts that Elijah Surratt's going to be a quality NFL player. So I'm putting him at 1. I think he is the safest because he has that full. He has that like the full prototypical play style where he can play anywhere. He's been in the slot. He's been on the outside. He can do a little bit of everything. I don't think we can say that with Burden, so I think Surratt's more safe.
Okay. Thanks for your list there. And I think we definitely agree on the Matthew Golden being 3 there, kind of biggest bust risk if that hasn't already happened, right? But there's some flashes, so I think folks will still point to that and say, "Hey, Golden's only going to get better. His role is going to grow, etc." I will say that we differ a little bit on who we have at 1 and 2. I still think that Luther Burden, he's made it to the NFL level. He's flashed some things. He was third in the NFL in yards per route run this year. Now, I get it's a small sample size and it's one stat. I mean, it's not a end all be all as far as, that doesn't make him some sort of elite player. And he wasn't, like you said, he was inconsistent. But Burden, he is going to step into a larger role, whether that comes at the expense of, them trading a DJ Moore or getting rid of Olmide Zacchaeus, whatever the case is, it's going to be a potent offense. We know that another year Ben Johnson scheming up plays and getting comfortable with Luther Burden, integrating him into that offense should be pretty interesting. And we know what Luther Burden is. I mean, he is still kind of a raw receiver, but you get the ball into his hands like Rashee Rice, and you just feed him touches, and he should be pretty productive. Some safety there, I still think. Like you said, you don't exactly think he's going to be a bust, just maybe not live up to like the lofty expectations put out there. Versus, I think there is still some risk with Elijah Surratt. Like he could bomb his testing. I have not seen him breaking off big time plays as far as like down the field and then running away from guys. He just doesn't do that on a consistent basis against quality teams. He does that against the lower levels of competition or when he transferred up 2 times previously in his career. But when he got to Indiana here, he feasted in contested catch opportunities, right? He's a great back shoulder contested catch guy. I mean, his catch rate is great there. And he's not a guy who drops the ball a lot. He's scored a lot of touchdowns. So he's sure-handed. Like you said, he has some good route running ability, but there is some athleticism concerns, some burst, those types of things. The long speed's not there. So I don't think it's a sure thing that Elijah Surratt is some sort of a hit. That's why I say he's at 2. So, yeah, I feel like some good points were had, some good sparring back and forth there.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very least you can say 1 and 2, depending on or regardless of which one you do, were safer, and then you have Golden, just in a different realm,
Yeah,
and that's, I
for
mean, that
sure.
and that's what I'm trying to get to is, I know hindsight's 2020, and everyone's gonna say, well, of course AD Mitchell's not good now, of course Xavier Leggette's not good now, but like we knew this then, so let's just not fall for it again. And we're gonna go through some of these names, whether we go over it tonight or throughout the entire process. But there's players that are just going to be busts, and they seem pretty obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want another list of guys here, John?
Yeah,
All
let's
right.
go. I'm feeling good.
Feeling good. I love it. Let's switch. Let's switch positions here. I had a couple ideas in mind. Let's go to quarterbacks, and we're going to talk about one Indiana player as well. Another one, Fernando Mendoza, who is trending to be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. How about Cam Ward? Last year's number 1 pick in the NFL draft for the Tennessee Titans. And then we got Dante Moore at Oregon, another quarterback who is pretty hyped up, but he did not declare he's going back to spend 1 more season in Oregon. So you got a couple guys staggered class wise here. Now, I'm kind of curious where John goes.
Yeah, this one's tough. I mean, you gave me 2 players that I wasn't really overly in love with, in Fernando Mendoza and Cam Ward. And then you gave me one player who I think is just going to bomb in year 4, and that's Dante Moore. So Dante Moore is my 3. This seems like basically like the Matthew Golden all over again, and that's going to surprise people. Well, any new listeners, it's going to surprise. I don't think I'm pretty sure I already mentioned that Dante Moore is my new Garrett Nussmeier, and I'm like, I'm going to hate on him as much as possible. He doesn't run. He doesn't push the ball down the field. Somehow he still turns the ball over at a decent clip. I don't. Dante Moore does nothing that I'm overly excited about. And I mean, people will say, "Oh, the surroundings and who was he throwing to?" And, he had DeCorian Moore. He had everyone's favorite tight end and Kenyon Sadiq. I mean, he had quality players. He might not have had Troy Franklin's and players like that, like of Oregon past that we fell in love with, but he had quality enough players. This was not some terrible team that had no one to throw to. It's really when you start comparing Ward and and Mendoza that it's a little more difficult because I think that's when you start getting into your ceiling versus your floor arguments here. And I think it's Cam Ward has a higher ceiling to me, but he has a lower floor. Mendoza has a higher floor, but he has a lower ceiling to me. And this is a little unfair because we've already seen Cam Ward do it for a year, albeit in pretty terrible situation and circumstances and everything. I think when it's all said and done, I think I'm gonna go Ward at 2 and Mendoza at 1. They're not that far apart for me. I really, if you wanted my like God honest true opinion, I think they should be high end backups more than they should be franchise QBs or considered franchise QBs for team. But we also know that the team, NFL is starved for QB talent right now, so they're both going to be thrust into roles that they're probably not ready for, and all that kind of stuff. I have them pretty close, but I feel pretty confident with that. And honestly, Mendoza, one of our listeners gave me crap because I said that I comped Mendoza to AJ McCarron a couple months back. And honestly, at the time, it felt pretty apt. I think maybe Aaron had mentioned like a Jared Goff or someone. It was someone like that, if I remember
I think
correctly.
Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones was maybe
Daniel
thrown out
Jones,
there.
and honestly, I felt pretty good about it at the time. But he's done a better job. He's gotten better like week to week as the competition level has gone up. I mean, he didn't have the greatest game last night, but Miami came to play. I mean, I don't know that I'm really like saying he obviously we can say that he did not have a bad game. He did not have a great game. Mendoza did. So I think he's really grown as a player on me, and that's not to say all of a sudden I think he's some absolute stud that I have to go draft, but I don't think maybe I think he could be a little bit better than AJ McCarron now, and maybe he will be a Jared Goff or a Daniel Jones or somebody like that. But we already know Daniel Jones has already failed as a player, so these are not even like high end comps or anything like that either. So I hopefully I've said enough there. I feel like I said a lot, but yeah, I have 3, 2, 1, and that was Moore at 3, Ward at 2, and then Mendoza at 1.
Yeah, I think I agree with you as far as the ratings go and in that order of them. Dante Moore, still a lot of risk. I mean, the guy, he had to return back to college. He kind of flopped there in the college football playoffs, did not look good, and that apparently hurt his stock enough, unless there was some crazy NIL offer thrown at him. I don't really think that's probably the case. I'm sure he's getting paid well, but he just did not look good, did not do enough this season. For a guy who is safe with the ball, Dante Moore throws too many picks, makes too many mistakes, and he's not demonstrating great ability to pass down the field or dynamic rushing ability. So I just don't think he's that great of a prospect by any means. And then we get to Cam Ward, Fernando Mendoza, just because we have a year of seeing Cam Ward kind of get rattled, and we know that's the biggest thing with quarterbacks nowadays. Is like there's some talented guys coming into the league who get ruined. Their career, their confidence gets shot, and may never come back after just being beat up and playing poorly and losing all their confidence as a rookie. So I think unfortunately we have to put Cam Ward at 2, just based on the struggles that he had, and then they're bringing in Salah, who, I mean, I don't know if that really instills any sort of confidence in the development there for Ward. I mean, we'll see who else they surround him with, but they're still probably going to struggle to have enough quality playmakers there. I don't know how quickly that team turns around, but I think Mendoza then should be number 1. It's a little bit safer. Is there truly any safe quarterback prospect coming out in this draft? I don't know if we can confidently say that. Like you said, there are some issues with Mendoza as a prospect, but overall, I mean, like you said, he continued to improve. He had a stellar season. He showed great mobility. He showed good decision making, ability to play within a system and utilize his weapons to the best of their abilities too. Yeah, no, I like Mendoza a good amount. I think he could be a very solid quarterback for years in the NFL. Probably not elite, but that's fine. So I'll put him at 1 as well.
I just figured out we're gonna have to like put this onto some kind of graphic and put it out there on Twitter and get some people to yell at us because people are not gonna be happy, having Burden at 2, more at 3. It's yeah, it's gonna get ugly quick.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So do you have any in mind? Otherwise, I got more. I can keep them coming here.
No, honestly, I'm liking your list, so keep it going.
Okay. Why don't I get? I mean, this is kind of spicy. This is not one. I don't even know if I expect any busts out of this list, but just for fun, to toy at the heartstrings of all the people listening and expecting greatness from this incoming rookie class. Let's go Jeremiah Love, Makai Lemon, or Jordan Tyson.
Oh, all right. Well, let me caveat this by saying I don't think that any of them will truly bust.
Yeah.
So I don't think that that is, if we're just looking at it from like, I think that Dante Moore will be a bust when it's all said and done. Matthew Golden will be a bust or is a bust, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to have to put a player here at 3, but I don't necessarily think they're going to be a bust for bust purposes. Although I do think they will be a bust for expectations, like we said with the Travis Hunter and with the Luther Burden, with players like that. We can still say that they're a bust for expectations, and I think that will be Makai Lemon. He's being pushed up to the wide receiver 1 by a lot of people. I'm hearing it more and more. I just saw it from our good friend Wyatt. Unfortunately, he said the more he looks at it today, the more he thinks Makai Lemon's the wide receiver 1 in the class. And unfortunately, I'm seeing it more and more. These narratives catch hold, and the next thing you know, everyone says, "Okay, Makai Lemon would have been the wide receiver 1 in any other class." And like, okay, I did the Makai Lemon grudge match with Andy earlier in the off season. Honestly, Lemon started playing better after we did the grudge match. He's clearly a listener of the show. He started doing things a little different. His A dot went up. Things got better, but he didn't drastically change as a player. He didn't become Jordan Tyson. He didn't become Jamar Chase. He didn't become, anyone like that. He became the best wide receiver on his team, which is great. But when it's all said and done, I really do go back to I feel like he is a wide receiver too in for NFL purposes, maybe even for fantasy purposes. Maybe he's a wide receiver too. I would probably go on the lower end of that for fantasy purposes, even unless you have some kind of like crazy PPR bonuses or whatever it might be. I just don't think he has the ceiling of those other guys. But he does have the floor, and that's what I'm saying, that he's not going to be a full on bust, but I think he will be an expectation bust. Jeremiah Love is probably going to get overdrafted in the NFL draft. He's probably going to go to a team that is worse than they should be and should have been drafting a offensive lineman or a wide receiver or a defensive edge or whatever, and yet they drafted a running back in Jeremiah Love, a la the Raiders from last year, thinking that Ashton Genty was going to fix all of their problems. So I do not think Jeremiah Love will be a bust. I do think he could be a bust compared to expectations because I think he's going to be similar to Ashton Genty. He's going to be on a worse team than he should be. He's going to struggle because of that. Maybe the offensive line isn't as good. Maybe the offense in general isn't as good as it should be. And maybe it takes him a couple years to truly become something. Beyond that, even if he does end up on a good squad, he's never surpassed 200 touches in a year, 200 rushing attempts in a year. We don't know that a team is truly going to say, you are a workhorse back. You are going to go touch the ball 350 times this year and be our CMC or, whatever it might be. So I kind of struggle with that. He's not small, but he's not big, and he's kind of that tweener where yes, the NFL is falling more in love with them. They're allowing more of them, but we still see Jameer Gibbs have to get spelled, even as much as we love him. The thing is, Jameer Gibbs is unbelievably efficient, and so he can go out and still lead the league in touchdowns and things like that. I don't know that Jeremiah Love's going to go do the same thing, so I have him at 2. And I get, the only thing we ever say about Jordan Tyson are the injuries, but they're unrelated. I don't see any reason to correlate them or say we're going to have issues moving forward or anything like that. Assuming, as far as I know, he's going to be 100% healthy going into the offseason. He played the last couple of games of the year. There's really no reason to think that he's going to be hurt, miss time, not be able to work out, not be able to run or whatever. And he might not have to because he's probably going to get drafted top 10 in the NFL draft. So he might not even run just because he doesn't have to. But the guy is just the only tier one wide receiver for me in this draft class. He's the only guy that I would compare to a Malik Neighbors. He's the only guy that I would say has that ability to go just dominate an offense, be that dominant wide receiver, a la Garrett Wilson, a la Malik Neighbors, players like that. Unfortunately, you just don't have that with the Mekhi Lemon. You don't even have that with the Carnell Tate, my wide receiver 2 in the class. But Jordan Tyson has that ability. And so even if there's slight concerns with the injuries, I'm willing to completely ignore those and say, hey, I'm taking a shot on the best player in this draft. Jordan Tyson, my number 1.
Okay. Um, I am going to probably shake things up here significantly.
Uh-oh.
In fact, let's flip all the ones you put, and
Oh,
that is
no.
going to be mine. And I will lay out why we are going to differ on them. And it's not even say like we said, I think we think all these players could have a lot of success, and we don't really expect any of them to truly bust. But let's first start with Jordan Tyson, because Jordan Tyson, I will start with, he is a great talent. His abilities, his versatility, those things should get him some pretty high draft capital if he passes his medical check, which, like you said, maybe you don't expect a lot of issues long term from those previous injuries, but he has a history of ACL tear. Last year, he aggravated a hamstring injury. The previous year, he had a season-ending shoulder injury. Like Jordan Tyson, that list is definitely adding up. That's something that Lemon, Love, they do not have a long list like that. So I think that there's just some risk from an injury history standpoint, and potentially, passing medicals and just what happens if he does have maybe some propensity to get injured at a slightly higher rate. That's one of the few indicators of future injury, is kind of that extensive previous history of injury, unfortunately for Jordan Tyson. So again, less of the player talent, more just of that. So he's going to be my 3, potentially most likely to bust, with the caveat it's probably more injury health related than anything. I will actually keep Jeremiah Love at 2, so we're kind of flipping our Lemon and Tyson basically. But I think that Jeremiah Love is a safe prospect. Like I understand the concern sometimes with a guy who doesn't have that extensive workload in college, but it's not a matter of he can't do it. He never broke down. It was just a matter of he also played with the guy who's another top 5 back in this class. So and a lot of other talented guys behind him, right? So Jeremiah Love, he's always been efficient. He's a good receiver as well, so he's a 3-down back. I think there's some safety there with him. But the reason I'm going with Mekhi Lemon at number 1 and being the safest is because I truly think he is a super high floor player who doesn't have that injury history. He has a lot of things going his way. Like if this is a ceiling conversation, this is a completely different list and ranking for me. But as far as a floor list or, least likely to bust, yeah, I think there's a ton going for him there. I mean, he's the only wide receiver since 2023 to average over 3 yards per route run against both zone and man. The last person to do that for their career was Jackson Smith and Jigba. He has a high percentage success rate on contested catches, despite not being the biggest guy out there. So he's checking that box. He is 3rd in the class in forced missed tackles, so he's definitely forcing tackles after the catch, right? He's a good yards after catch guy. We're seeing that he's successful at the catch point with contested catch rate. He won the Blitnikoff, which, I mean, again, I mean, it doesn't really mean a lot other than, I mean, people are acknowledging that he is a great receiver, and he only had 3 drops over the last 2 seasons. PFF rated him the #1 wide receiver this last year. I think that's all pretty telling for Mekhi Lemon. He's not the perfect prospect because he wasn't extremely productive before this season, but he had been trending upward each year, especially as he started his career playing corner part-time for USC, which I think is pretty remarkable that he has progressed the way that he has. So I think the ceiling's still pretty high, but the floor was just too good for me to pass up with Mekhi Lemon. So that's my Lemon at 1, Love at 2, Tyson at 3.
Well, and I get why you would rank him that way, but to be clear, does that mean that you're drafting Mekhi Lemon over Jordan Tyson in your rookie drafts?
Let's see. I think some of it depends. I mean, like if I have a rookie draft right now, I am a little bit more gun shy on Tyson, I will admit, because there's a chance he slides in the draft. Chance that they're concerned, let's do some imaging on that knee. Let's do some extensive medical checks. Oh, is that shoulder going to require you have a labrum tear? Oh, well, that's going to require surgery. You're out for your rookie season. Like you just don't know. There are those potential concerns. I'm not saying that they're going to happen with Tyson, but there's just more uncertainty there versus I view Lemon as, again, a little bit more safe at this route. So it's different about drafting for ceiling, but you mentioned earlier on this podcast, we got to also think about the floor of these players. And I'm trying to do so right now. Once we get more information, once we get that more complete profile, I have no problem drafting Tyson first in the first round of rookie drafts when it finally becomes apparent that everything's lined up for him. But at this rate, yeah, I would potentially select a Lemon ahead right now.
I was just curious because obviously when you flip them like that, and like I said, it was a lot closer than the other ones, so it gets difficult when you're having to rank them. But when you're flipping them like that, I was just curious if you would be willing to actually do it in a draft, or if you're just saying, hey, if someone was going to bust from this list, it's going to be the guy that's been injured a bunch, right?
Yeah, and that probably is the case too, right? I mean, I'm definitely tailoring that list for it, but hopefully this exercise has been fun for people. I mean, again, we didn't agree on all of them, though we did have some agreements along the way.
I agree. Do you have any other good list or controversial list? Because I think I have one for us if you don't.
Sure. Yeah, we can wrap up with one here.
All right, so this one's going to be strictly college players, and I kind of want to see where you're at as far as the bust scale for these 3 players, because it's going to be, and I think this one's going to be tough for you, but I wanted it to be tough. Okay, I think this is going to be our top 3 QBs by the end of next year. Okay. Going into the 2027 draft class, I think these are going to be your top 3 QBs to get drafted. So, Arch Manning, Julian Sayin, Darian Mensah. Oh, Aaron's gonna cry. He's like, "Oh no!"
Yeah, that's pretty mean. Those are good quarterbacks there, and especially because this is a bust list. Because I would normally say like, okay, Julian Sayin, I don't know if there's like that much ceiling there, right? But he's got a safe floor. And I think that Arch, unfortunately, he does have a little bit more ambiguity there with the inconsistencies we've seen thus far in his career, and he's certainly been turning that around. Like the trajectory is definitely up again on Arch, so it's it's tough. And then we both like Darian Mensah so much. I mean, he was a guy that I called out preseason, and we've just been very complimentary of his talents. And I don't know where he's going to end up, but he is in the transfer portal. Miami is rumored. We'll see. I don't know. The championship game just concluded last night, so we'll see if they get that locked up or not. But, ooh, I am not super prepared for that one. I will be honest, last second.
I can go first. Honestly, I'm not even saying I'm super prepared for it. I think it is difficult, and I think it's definitely more of like the last one where I'm not even necessarily saying any of them will bust, but if I had to give reasons for why one might, I think it I think it could be Julian Sayin at three. I think that's where I would put it. And once again, this is not even saying Sayin has definitely surprised me. He did much better this year than I thought he was going to. That being said, I do think that Ohio State had a fairly easy uh, schedule this year. And when he didn't have the easy schedule, when he hit some of those other teams, you saw maybe, kind of like when Dante Moore finally hit like the tough part of the schedule or the playoffs, we saw kind of who he truly was. And I think we saw that more with Julian saying, not to say he was bad or anything like that, but he has the highest interception rate out of any of them. He has the lowest adjusted yards per attempt. He has the lowest intended air yards out of the three of them. He has the lowest big time throw rate out of the three of them. So if I was going to choose one to potentially bust or maybe not even be in this on this list by the end of this upcoming year, I think it would be saying that is not me saying he's absolutely a bust or anything like that. In fact, like I said, he did kind of surprise me a little bit, although he's playing with Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith and all these other quality NFL players. So maybe we can take that with a grain of salt a little bit. Darian Mensah just transferred, or I mean, I guess now I'm seeing Duke is possibly suing Mensah and stuff. So who knows what's going to happen? But uh, I believe he is like everything's wrapped up and he's going to be at Miami. Is that correct? I don't know if it's 100% or if it's just speculation still. I thought I've seen kind of conflicting reports where like some people were saying it like it's absolutely happening. Some people were saying it more of like, it could happen, it should happen, but it's not 100%. But if we just assume, I mean, I would have been happy with him at Duke. But if he goes to Miami, I think we're talking about a potentially really big step forward for Darian Mensah going into year four there. And then, I mean, Arch has just steadily gotten better each week, each start. And, everyone has concerns. He played a lower level high school. He hadn't started that much and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? They were right. But every start he's getting better. Every start he's getting more confident. And what looked kind of disastrous at the beginning of the season looked like a true stud player at the end of the season. And I think with everything that Texas has done, I would almost say it's like, I mean, you can't ever say anyone's foolproof or like it, or bust proof or anything like that, but I almost feel that way about Arch at this point of like he's surrounded by too many quality players and he's looked too good in the second half of the season here for him to just all of a sudden fall apart and be terrible. And then that's not even mentioning the Arch Manning name. So give me Julian Sayin at three, Darian Mensah at two, and Arch Manning at one.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I will say that, man, Darian Mensah, that there's a lot of upside with that profile for sure. From a passing standpoint, from a rushing standpoint, I will say it's lackluster. But that's the same thing with Sand, right? Sand's not out there wowing anybody with his legs. He's more mobile than I think I would give him credit for. Previously in his evaluations, but yeah, and then you got Arch who has that upside with the legs and the arm talent, and like you said, the situation there is very solid and stable. But I mean, so is the same thing for Sand. So you could make a lot of the same arguments for multiple of these guys. I will go with the guy, unfortunately, Darian Mensah, with the most moving pieces, the most ambiguity, transferring whether he even stays at Duke, which is not known traditionally for that many great quarterback developments. I'll put him at three, Mensah. Not saying I, again, dislike him. He's my guy, but for this exercise, probably a little bit more likely to bust. But there's still, again, a good ceiling, great passer there. And then I'll say at two, I'm going to put Julian Sand because for NFL purposes, upside, mobility, all those things, I do think that there's more upside with Arch, and I'll even say I don't know if it's floor necessarily because I do think Julian Sand probably takes the cake with stable system, good floor. He'll have some solid stats again, I'm sure, next season. But as far as like truly being a difference maker, I don't know. So that could make Sayan a bust for sure. So I'll put Arch at 1, Sayan at 2, Darian Mensah at 3.
I like it. I got one more, should be a quicker one for you, only because I wanted to mention, I feel like there's one player in particular in this class that we've already kind of mentioned his name, but there's one wide receiver in this class that kind of reminds me of the A.D. Mitchells and the Malachi Corleys and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to go Omar Cooper Jr., Eric McAllister, and Chris Brazell the second. One, two, three. What do you got?
I'm going to go Omar Cooper Jr. at number 1. I like him a good amount for sure. I think he's more than just a slot weapon. How they deployed him this year at Indiana. And you said Eric McAllister, and who's the third guy?
Chris Brazell.
Chris Brazell. I put Chris Brazell at 3. I think I even mentioned him at the very beginning of the show as a potential guy this year where I'm just like, high bust potential. I think there's some of that from McAllister too, right? I mean, it's TCU. I'm not banking on those wide receivers hitting, unfortunately, right? It's lazy to just keep saying the same thing, but until they prove us wrong, until they get
Yeah.
some wide receiver development, there's definitely red flags with this profile. Kind of a late producer, in some ways. Maybe just dominating because he's older, faster, bigger than the guys he's going against. But still, I'll put him at 2. I'm going to put Brazell at 3. So again, Omar Cooper Jr. definitely the guy that I'm most interested in the, let's say, second round of rookie drafts, versus these other guys I'm kind of fading at least at that cost.
No, and I'm with you, and I just want to do that one quickly because we'd kind of touched on Brazell being like the potential red flag player in this draft class, and I think he definitely is of those guys. There's other players that I'm not as high on, but they don't really have the red flags that Brazell has. The only thing Brazell really has going for him right now is projected draft capital. Other than that, I don't really see anything that stands out. And you can say like you have McAllister ahead of him. Obviously, I do as well. But McAllister's not even being projected to be drafted anywhere close to that right now. I think that might change as he's already moving up the process and throughout the process and everything. So I think he could get decent draft capital when it's all said and done. But no one's talking about McAllister in the first or anything like that. And I've definitely seen Brazell in the first. So you want to talk about bust potential. I think it is Chris Brazell. So I just kind of wanted to mention him, before we got out of this pod. Obviously, we're going to dive deep on all these rookies and get into names that you've never even heard of, and talk about the underwhelming tight end class that this is, eventually, because there's a lot of tight end names. I don't know that we should really be too excited about them. So we'll get into all that in on future pods. We have so much time to dive into all these players, but we wanted to look at these red flags and look at these potential bust players and who has the most potential to bust, that kind of thing in this draft class. Hopefully we answered some of your questions. Hopefully looking back at the previous years kind of helps you remember, hey, I did think this way about that guy. Hey, I did listen to blah, blah, blah. I did listen to the consensus that tell me that this guy is better than I thought he was. And I'm not going to do that this year, So hopefully that all works out for that. I do believe that we will be back in your ears next week. Hopefully we'll have Andy back with us. But Aaron, before we get out of here, do you have any words of wisdom for us?
I think I said all the words of wisdom here within the podcast today, but I do urge folks out there to be pretty critical when you're not just follow blindly what's been put out there as far as some of the hype, some of the runaway momentum that these guys will carry sometimes into the off season. So definitely do a thorough look into the players, get a variety of resources, and get a sound process for your prospect evaluation.
Absolutely. Very wise words there. We're going to go ahead and get out of here, but we will be back in your ears as soon as possible. Make sure you're liking, subscribing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can find us, and check out Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel. for our shorts, and for we actually noticed the numbers for even the long view and everything. YouTube videos here are going up, so we like to see that. We appreciate that. Appreciate you guys in the comments and everything else. We will see you next time. We're cashing out.